$370 million gone in 40 seconds. 1996, the very first launch of Europe's new Ariane 5 rocket. 40 seconds off the pad, it veered sideways, tore itself apart, and the self-destruct finished the job. And the cause wasn't a cracked engine or bad weather. It was one small piece of software, carried straight over from the older Ariane 4 rocket, and never rechecked for the new one. The old code did a job that was perfectly safe on Ariane 4. But Ariane 5 flew faster, a number ran off the end of what that code could hold, and the whole guidance system fell over. A reused component, one changed situation, and nobody asked the question that would have caught it. The question is simple, almost embarrassingly simple. What does this change actually affect? Reuse the code, fine, but what's different now, and have we checked it against the new conditions? That one question is the single move the most experienced project managers skip on a change, precisely because they're experienced. It's been fine 100 times, so the 101st time they don't ask. Hold on to that, because it's the whole episode.
Cynthia here, and let's be clear what a change even is, because it's bigger than a feature request. A change is anything that alters the plan everyone already agreed to. The scope, the schedule, or the budget. Those three, once they're locked, are your baselines, the signed-off version of the truth. A change is any hit to one of them. And that's why a change is a big deal, not a small favor. The whole point of a baseline is that you measure real progress against it. The moment somebody moves it quietly, without a decision, you've lost the yardstick. You can't tell if you're ahead or behind anymore because the line you were measuring against just slid and nobody wrote down when or why.
And here's the mental model the whole exam is built on. Change itself isn't the enemy. Change is normal, every real project gets them. Uncontrolled change is the enemy. The Ariane team didn't make a wild change, they reused something proven. What killed the rocket was that the change of context, from one rocket to a faster one, went through nobody's process. Nobody sat down and analyzed what reusing that code meant for the new flight. And here's the part that should haunt every project manager. There was a backup system, running the exact same code, and it failed a fraction of a second before the primary, for the exact same reason. They had redundancy, and it didn't save them, because redundancy that repeats the same unexamined assumption isn't a safety net. It's the same mistake, twice.
Look at the price tag on that skipped question, $370 million.
So here's the trap the exam lays over and over. A change shows up, and your gut hands you one of two wrong answers. Answer 1, just do it. You're responsive, you make the change happen, you look decisive. Answer 2, just say no. You protect the plan, you guard the baseline, you refuse. And on the exam, both of those are almost always wrong.
Take just do it first because it's the seductive one. You implement a change before you know what it costs, and a change never stays where you put it. That one extra field on a form touches the database, the reports, the security review, the test plan, 3 other teams. You said yes to a thing you hadn't measured, and the bill arrives later, always bigger than the favor you were doing.
So the yes and the no are the same mistake wearing different clothes?
Same mistake, exactly, and just say no is the evil twin. You reject a change flat to protect the plan, and you never analyzed it either. But what if that change was a new safety regulation you're now legally required to make? What if it fixes a defect that will sink the launch? Or it's the one thing the customer actually needs to accept the product? You just refused something you had to do on the same missing information the yes man was missing. Neither of them looked. That's the sin. Not the yes and not the no, the not looking. And notice both of them felt like leadership in the moment. The yes felt like service. The no felt like discipline. Both of those confident reflexes are the trap because confidence without analysis is just a faster way to be wrong. So what's the move that isn't a coin flip? You capture the change as a formal request, you log it so it can't get lost, and you analyze its impact before you decide anything. Assess, then route it through the process. That's the answer the exam rewards over almost everything else, and it feels slow, so people skip it.
And this is exactly where experience turns against you. When you've run 100 projects, saying yes fast feels like good service, and saying no fast feels like strong leadership. So the seasoned manager makes the call on the spot, either way, to look decisive. On the exam, that instinct is the wrong answer almost every single time. The tested project manager doesn't decide first and analyze never. They analyze first, then let the process decide.
And a stack of those on-the-spot yeses has a name.
It does. It's called scope creep, and it's just uncontrolled change in slow motion. No single yes felt big. Together, they blew the budget and the date, and nobody can point to the moment it happened, because it never went through a process where a moment exists. This is task 3 of the business environment domain, and that domain is now 26% of your exam. More than a quarter. Manage and control changes is squarely in the fresh, high-value zone. One quick, genuinely useful thing before we go deeper. Over at certs.professorerica.com there are free practice questions and free flashcards, no sign-up, and the change control set is full of exactly these just do it traps. Run them right after this while it's fresh, because reading about the trap and beating it under time pressure are two different skills. So sit with this one. A senior stakeholder pulls you aside and asks for one small change to the product, today, as a favor. Not through any process, just do it quietly. What's your move? Because your instinct to be helpful is about to hand you the wrong answer. Before we keep going, one small favor that actually moves the needle. If this is landing for you, tap like, then subscribe, and turn on the bell so you do not miss the rest. 2 taps, completely free, and it pushes this in front of more people who need it. To pressure test the change control calls today, we've got Professor Bianchi at the desk. He's here to help us stress every answer and find where the clean-sounding move is actually the wrong one. Professor Bianchi, welcome.
Glad to be here. I'll happily lean on anything that sounds a little too tidy.
So let's answer that favor question in a minute. But first, the very first enabler PMI lists under Task 3 is execute the change control process. Not invent one on the fly, execute the one you already have. So walk the room through the flow. What actually happens from the moment a change shows up?
Here's the flow in plain steps. Someone raises a change, and your first job is to capture it, a change request written down, not a hallway comment. Then you log it in the change log so it's tracked and can't quietly vanish. And a change request isn't only new scope. It might be a corrective action to get back on plan, a preventive action to stop a problem coming, or a defect repair to fix something broken.
And then the step that gives the process its real name, integrated change control. You analyze the impact, and the word integrated is the whole exam point. You don't just ask what this change costs in dollars. You ask what it does to the schedule, to scope, to quality, to risk, to resources, to the other work streams, all at once. A change to one thing is a change to everything it touches. Add a feature, and you've touched the schedule, the test plan, maybe the training and the documentation, maybe a new risk you didn't have yesterday. Miss the integration, and you approve a change based on 1/3 of its true cost, which is exactly how a change that looked cheap in the room turns expensive in the build. The impact analysis is where you find the other 2/3 before they find you.
And when nobody does that integrated math, you get Wembley Stadium. The rebuild opened in 2007, about a year late, and cost roughly £798 million, more than double the original number. A big chunk of that was changes and the disputes over them, changes to the work that piled up faster than anyone controlled. A famous, finished, beautiful stadium, delivered as a cautionary tale about what uncontrolled change does to a budget.
Hang on, I want the receipt on the enablers, not a paraphrase. Read me the actual line PMI wrote.
Gladly. Let's put the real outline on the desk, because the wording is the lesson here.
There it is in 4 lines. Execute the change control process. Communicate the status of proposed changes. Implement approved changes to the project. Update project documentation to reflect changes. Capture and run the process, keep people informed, build only what's approved, then write it into the record. That's the entire task, and the word approved in line 3 is doing enormous work.
So who actually says yes? That's the Change Control Board, a formally chartered group that reviews a change, weighs the impact analysis, and gives it one of a few outcomes. And crucially, the board isn't always a big committee. On a small project, it might be you plus a sponsor. On a big regulated program, it might be a standing group with legal, finance, engineering, and the customer all in the room. Your own authority, what you can approve alone versus what has to go up, is written down in advance in the change management plan. And don't skip the enabler most people forget. Communicate the status of proposed changes. Every change request has a state: submitted, under analysis, approved, deferred, rejected, and the people waiting on it deserve to know which. A change that's silently sitting in someone's inbox is its own kind of risk, because the requester assumes it's handled and plans around a yes that never came.
Wait, so I can't just approve my own project's changes?
Depends what the plan gave you. A low-impact change inside your delegated authority, yes, you can approve it and move. A change that moves the budget or the deadline, that goes to the board or the sponsor. The point is the boundary is decided before the pressure hits, not argued in the heat of a stakeholder leaning on you. So the request types you're weighing are 2 corrective, 1 preventive.
3 types, not 2. Defect repairs the third.
You're right, 3, corrective, preventive, and defect repair, plus updates to documents. Good catch, Chris. Which is exactly the kind of small thing a real board double checks, because a request logged under the wrong type gets routed to the wrong reviewer. So a quick gut check before the reveal. When that board finishes reviewing a change request, how many different verdicts can it hand back? Don't overthink it, just a number.
2, yes or no.
It's 3, and the missing one is the useful one. Approve, reject, and defer. Defer means not now. Come back with more information, or wait until the next phase. Half of good change control is that middle answer, because a lot of changes aren't wrong, they're just premature, or they're missing the analysis to decide yet. A board that can only say yes or no gets bullied into a yes because no feels harsh and the stakeholder is right there. Defer is the professional's escape hatch. It says this deserves a real answer and I'm not going to fake one under pressure. Bring me the impact numbers and I'll decide properly.
So carry 2 things off this desk. Every change gets captured and analyzed before anyone decides, and the board that decides can approve, defer, or reject inside authority you set in advance. Now, what happens after the yes? So the board said yes. Now the last 2 enablers, and they're where discipline actually lives. Implement approved changes and update the documentation to reflect them. The word approved is the whole rule. Only changes that cleared the process get built, nothing else. Not the clever idea from the hallway, not the favor, not the thing everyone assumes is fine.
And updating the record is not the boring part, it's the part that keeps the change from unraveling. When a change is approved, you move the baselines, the scope statement, the schedule, the budget, so the plan now tells the truth. And you update every document it touched, the requirements, the risk register, the test plan. Skip that, and 3 weeks later, half the team is building against the old plan and half against the new one, and nobody knows which is real. There's a cousin of this the exam loves to test: configuration management. Change control governs the plan and the baselines, the project side. Configuration management governs the product itself, its features, its versions, which build is the official one. They work together, but they're not the same thing. Change control decides whether the product changes. Configuration management makes sure everyone knows exactly which version of the product they're looking at once it does.
And there's a subtle exam favorite hiding here. A change your sponsor approved verbally, in a meeting, with a nod, still has to be documented before it's real. A verbal yes is not an approved change, it's an intention. Write it up, log the approval, then build. Because when memories disagree 6 months later, the log is the only thing that doesn't take sides. This trips up experienced people constantly, because in the real world, a trusted sponsor's word is good enough to start moving. On the exam, it isn't. Undocumented approval is treated as no approval every single time.
And never add extra you weren't asked for. That's gold plating.
Right, and that's the mirror image of scope creep. Scope creep is changes creeping in from outside, from stakeholders, without control, and the scope baseline quietly stretches to hold them. Gold plating is the team adding polish nobody requested, thinking they're being generous, and the baseline doesn't even move, they just spend effort no one asked for. Both put unapproved work into the product, and both are changes that skip the process. The exam frowns on the generosity just as hard as it frowns on caving to a stakeholder. And here's the counterintuitive part experienced people resist. Even if the extra feature is genuinely better, even if the customer would love it, you don't just add it. You raise it as a change, you let it get analyzed and approved, and then you build it. Good ideas still go through the door, they just knock first. If it wasn't requested and approved, it doesn't get built. And when changes get made without weighing the impact, the ending can be brutal. Picture the Pruitt-Igoe housing project in St. Louis. 33 11-story towers, finished in the mid-1950s. When the heating costs ran over budget, the team made a chain of cost-cutting design changes elsewhere, each one small on paper, none of them analyzed for what it did to the whole. 20 years later, the project had failed so completely that the fix wasn't a renovation. They demolished it, tower by tower, with dynamite.
Let me tell you how this really shows up because it's rarely that dramatic. An email lands on a Friday afternoon. A stakeholder wants one more field on the intake form, tiny, the kind of thing you could add before lunch. So the team just adds it. No requests, no analysis, be helpful, and
One field. How bad can one field be?
that's what they thought. Except the field collects a date of birth, which quietly drags the form into a privacy rule it wasn't under before. Now the storage needs encrypting, the retention policy changes, the security review reopens, and the release everyone promised for the next week slips by a month. One field added to be nice, and it reopened 4 other things nobody costed. That's the whole danger of an unassessed change in one Friday email.
Honestly though, a good manager's decisive. One field, you make the call and ship it. All that logging and analysis is bureaucracy that just slows you down.
I hear you, Chris, and that's exactly the instinct the exam is testing. But flip it. The process isn't the slow path, it's the fast one, because it catches that privacy problem before you build the field, not a month after. The 5 minutes to log it and ask what it touches is what saves the month. Skip the process to be quick, and you're not fast, you're just early to the rework.
And here's the honest middle because Chris isn't all wrong. A good process is right-sized. A genuine typo fix, a 2-line documentation change shouldn't wait a month for a full board, and if your process does that, your process is broken. So you give the manager delegated authority to fast-track the truly small stuff, and you send the impactful changes to the board. The rule isn't do the heavy process every time. It's never skip the analysis just because a change felt small, because felt small is exactly how the privacy field looked.
So put a number on the felt small change. A team adds a feature without analyzing it. The extra development is $90,000. Reworking the pieces already built around it, another $70,000. The schedule slips, and that delay costs $45,000. And retesting everything the change touched, $25,000 more. The change that looked free, fully costed, is $230,000.
And that number is the rep. Same as my morning runs in the dark, honestly, the whole point is you do the small annoying thing before the sun's up so the expensive thing never happens. Log it, analyze it, then decide. That's the rep.
And on the exam, that whole reflex has a name, Step 6 on the decision filter, respect the process. You don't root around change control because a change looks small or a stakeholder's impatient. When you see 4 options and one of them quietly skips the process to save a little time, that's almost always the wrong answer. So how does all of this change when the project's agile and change is supposed to be welcome? Let's go find out. So everything so far has been the predictive world, boards and baselines. Professor Bianchi is back because the exam loves to flip you into Agile, where the whole vibe is supposed to be change is welcome. And 2 exam drills to close. Professor Bianchi.
Happy to. And this is where a lot of experienced people trip, because they hear welcome change and switch their brain off.
So start with the principle because it's real. The Agile Manifesto literally says welcome changing requirements, even late in development. That's not a grudging tolerance, it's a design goal. Agile is built to absorb change instead of resisting it. On a predictive project, a late change is a threat. On an Agile one, it can be a gift, a chance to build something better than the original idea.
But welcome doesn't mean chaos, and this is the part people miss. A change doesn't get shouted at a developer and built that afternoon. It goes to the product owner, it lands on the product backlog, and it gets prioritized against everything else waiting there. Then it's pulled into a future sprint when its turn comes. There's still an owner, the product owner, who is the single throat that says what gets built next. And there's still a queue, the backlog, which is just a prioritized list of everything wanting to be built. The change is controlled, it just flows through a leaner channel than a formal board. Nobody had to fill out a 5-page form, but nobody got to skip the owner and the queue either. That's the trade Agile makes: less ceremony, same discipline.
So let me push this hard, because it's the tempting conclusion. If Agile welcomes change, then on an Agile project you can drop change control completely. Any stakeholder, any change, any time, straight in. Change management is a predictive world relic. Why keep a board when the whole method says yes to change?
That's not what welcome change means, and you know it.
Chris is right to plant his feet there. Welcome changing requirements is not accept any change anywhere, anytime. Look at what actually protects the work, the sprint goal. Once a sprint starts, the team's committed to a goal, and you don't dump a new feature into the middle of it and blow that commitment up. The change is real, it's welcome, and it waits for the backlog and the next sprint. That's not bureaucracy, that's the control. Agile didn't delete change management, it made it lean.
And the honest picture of welcome but governed change is the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. They started building it in 1882 and it topped out this year 144 years later. The design kept changing the whole time, architect after architect, new methods, new ideas. It wasn't frozen and it wasn't chaos, it was change absorbed one governed step at a time. Honestly, it's the slowest lasagna night in history, everyone adding a layer across a century, but the recipe held.
So the two worlds rhyme. Predictive routes are changed through a change control board and a baseline update. Agile routes it through a product owner and a backlog. Different machinery, identical idea, a named owner and a defined process decide what gets built and when. Nobody just does it.
So on the exam, how do you tell which one they even want from you?
Read the approach in the question. If it's a plan-driven, baseline, contract kind of scenario, they want the change control board and the baseline update. If it's sprints, a backlog, a product owner, they want the backlog and the next iteration. But the very first move is the same in both. You never just do it and you never just refuse. You assess the change and route it through whichever process the project runs on.
So build the change into the plan itself, not onto the...
Into which baseline, though? There are three: scope, schedule, cost.
All three that it touches, that's the honest answer, and it's why the analysis is integrated. A schedule change that doesn't move cost is rare. Update every baseline the change actually hits, and every document under it. Alright, let's drill it, exam style. First scenario, plan-driven project. A senior stakeholder emails you a new requirement mid-project and wants it in. What's your best next action?
Assess the impact and put it through the change control process. Write it as a change request, log it, analyze what it does to scope, schedule, and cost, and take it to the board or the sponsor per your authority. You do not implement it because a senior person asked, and you do not reject it to protect the plan. You root it, and watch the tempting distractors. Do it now to keep them happy, or refuse to protect the baseline. Both skip the analysis, both are wrong.
Harder one, Agile project. You're 3 days into a 2-week sprint, and the product owner shows up wanting a brand new feature added right now. Do you?
No, it goes on the product backlog and gets prioritized for a future sprint. You protect the current sprint goal. Even the product owner doesn't get to blow up a running sprint. They own the backlog, not the middle of your 2 weeks.
Exactly right. Welcome the change, backlog the change, protect the sprint. Same discipline, Agile clothes.
Professor Bianchi, that is the clearest anyone has put the just do it trap. Before you go, leave us the single line to walk out the door with.
Glad to help. Hold this and you'll never miss one of these. A change is never a yes or no reflex, it's a thing you assess and route, so whatever the project, you capture it, analyze the whole impact, let the right owner decide, and only then build what's approved.
And that's Business Environment Task 3 done. Next in this block is impediments and issues, clearing the blockers in front of the team, which is its own kind of control. This domain quietly became the biggest single slice of the exam, so give it the study hours it now earns.
But hold today's 2 ideas first. On the exam, an uncontrolled change is almost always the wrong answer. The yes and the no both lose. And whatever the project, the first move is to assess the impact and route the change through the process. A board and a baseline in predictive, a product owner and a backlog in agile. Assess, route, decide, then build.
And nobody is born knowing that instinct, honestly. Everyone's first reflex is to be helpful and just do the change. Retraining that into assess and route is the whole skill, and it's the one that quietly saves projects.
If this finally made change control click instead of feeling like paperwork, subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making these. And the free practice questions and flashcards are waiting at certs.professorerica.com. The business environment set is exactly where the fresh, high-value points are hiding on the new exam. Before you close the tab, one honest question. On your last project, what was the last change someone just did without running it through any process, and what did it end up costing? Tell us in the comments. Assess it, route it, and let the process do the deciding, and the answer the exam wants stops being a guess. Catch you in the next one.